Hello again, everyone. I'm Daniel, the cross-cultural nerd, here with another video for you today. Recently, within the last 2 weeks, we had Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and I took advantage of the discounts to invest in D&D Beyond, finally, and get a bunch of material. Over the last several days, I read the materials that I didn't have already, and I've seen some pretty darn interesting stuff. I still haven't gotten any of the published adventure books, because, well, while many do play in established campaign settings published by Wizards of the Coast, in my 10 years of playing Dungeons & Dragons, I've always just played in homebrewed worlds. From my first game session back in 2008 to the campaign I've been running for the better part of the last 2 years. Many other gamers also love homebrewed settings, and a good one really shows the creativity and the dedication of a good game master. So, after reading up on my D&D Beyond haul, I got to thinking, which of these books are best for those who just care about homebrew settings? And thus, we get into our first ranking video. For the purposes of this, I will be excluding all adventure modules published by Wizards of the Coast. Curse of Strahd, Lost Mines of Phandelver, Tomb of Annihilation, sorry, not gonna be covered. I will also be excluding the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide, as these are the core books and should already be in your collection. This leaves the following 9 supplement rulebooks: the Elemental Evil Player's Companion, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, Volo's Guide to Monsters, the Turtle Package, One Grung Above, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Mordenkainans' Tome of Foes, Wayfarers' Guide to Eberron, and Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, in order of publication. My rankings will be based on the amount of material not exclusive to an official campaign setting available to players and dungeon masters compared to the price of the rulebook on the Wizards of the Coast site, or, if unavailable there, on Dungeon Masters Guild. Basically, which has the most bang for your buck. I realize one can get these cheaper on D&D Beyond and on Amazon, but I'm trying to cite the prices from the most official sources first. A lower ranking does not, by any means, imply a bad product. It just means I feel the amount of options not exclusive to a certain setting isn't enough for what you're paying for. Races, class archetypes, items, and spells don't take much to include in your own homebrew setting, but the histories and the social, cultural, and political norms of established settings are, in my opinion, a little bit less useful unless you just want to cherry pick the things that inspire you most. Your homebrewed setting is just that, your setting. With that in mind, let's get down to our ranking. Number 9, One Grung Above, retailing on the DM's Guild for $4.99. This was a streamed event on the D&D Twitch channel tied into Tomb of Annihilation and using the Grung race from Volo's Guide to Monsters Bestiary as playable characters. The money went to the Extra Life charity, which is a good cause, but while charity is great, from a pragmatic perspective, you get very little for your money. A 4-page PDF about Grungs and the characters from the stream. And if you also play an Adventurers League on the side, even though that's not homebrew, it's not an official race. Get this only if you want every possible published race. Number 8, the Turtle Package, retailing on the DM's Guild and on D&D Beyond for $9.99. This also ties into Tomb of Annihilation and makes the Turtle race playable. The money also goes to Extra Life, and it's got more than One Grung Above. It's got info on the Turtle race, 5 monsters, and information about the Turtle's home region. However, this video is geared towards homebrew settings, and so the regional info is less important here. $10 is steep for what you get, but at least it's for charity. Although, again, from a sheerly pragmatic perspective, I recommend you do get it at a discount. Number 7, the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, retailing on Wizards of the Coast for $39.95. This book does have some good material. You have the first mention of the Duergar Dwarf subrace as playable in a supplement rulebook. You have the second mention of the Deep Gnome, the first Tiefling variants, the Battle Rager Barbarian and some new totems for barbarians, the Arcana domain for clerics, the fighter archetype called the Purple Dragon Knight, or the Banneret outside of Forgotten Realms, the Way of the Long Death, and the first mention of the Way of the Sun Soul for monks, the Paladin's Oath of the Crown, first mentions of the Mastermind and Swashbuckler Rogue archetypes, the first mentions of the Storm Sorcerer, the Undying Patron Warlock, the Blade Singer Wizard, a few cantrips, and, perhaps most interestingly, 12 backgrounds that can really help flesh out your character during creation. There are also tips for how to tweak the options in the book for homemade worlds. However, the book is only 159 pages. It's a good bit less than most of the others, and the vast majority is dedicated to stuff solely in a particular region of the Forgotten Realms, the Sword Coast. It is a really nice read, but even if you get it on Amazon or on D&D Beyond for cheaper, it will still run you a lot for what you get that is particularly useful for homebrewing. The class and the background options, though, are a very nice addition. I recommend you pick this up at a discount when you can. Number 6, the Elemental Evil Player's Companion. This is an official PDF you can get directly from the Wizards of the Coast site, and it was also the first rule supplement to be released outside of the core books. Now, it is just 25 pages with some races and spells, but it has the rank it does because, unlike One Grung Above and the total package and everything else on this list, it's completely free. You owe it to yourself to pick this up because it is zero cost to you. Nothing. Zero. Those who have books further up the ranking will note that most of the information within is also covered in other materials. However, this is the sole supplemental rulebook that has the Aarakocra and Genasi races. The Deep Gnome, the Goliath, and the spells are useful if you don't have the other books. But even if you do, you will want the Aarakocra and you'll want the Genasi. And it bears repeating, it's free! Pure profit. Number 5, the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, retailing on the Wizards of the Coast site for $49.95. Now, this was a virtual tie with the one right above it, and I'll give some details. Don't think that the rank implies that this book is bad or mediocre. I had an absolute blast reading through this book, and I found the setting fascinating, to the point that now I really want to play a Ravnica game. Ravnica is a setting from Magic the Gathering. I've never played Magic the Gathering because I like having money, and but I would really be interested in playing a game of Ravnica now. However, I am judging this based on the amount of content suitable, particularly for homebrew settings, for the price. Outside of the interesting setting from which people can, of course, draw inspiration, Ravnica gives us 5 new races: the Centaur, the Minotaur, the Loxodon, the Simic Hybrid, and the Vidalcan. And it gives us 2 new class archetypes, the Cleric's Order Domain and the Druid's Circle of Spores. There are several backgrounds related to the various in-universe guilds that could be potentially tweaked for factions in your own universe, as well as several magic items and a lot of new monsters and NPCs. What holds this book back from being higher on the list is the price. The next entry also introduces races, backgrounds, and magic items, but retails for far less. Granted, you can get this cheaper on Amazon or on D&D Beyond, but the next entry still gives a similar amount of stuff for less. Number 4, Wayfarers' Guide to Eberron, retailing on the DM's Guild for $19.99. Eberron is another very interesting setting, however, we just care about the most applicable things for homebrewed worlds in this video. Eberron also gives us some new races: the Changeling, the Kalashtar, the Shifter, and the Warforged, as well as a background for being an agent of a certain great house. Furthermore, it introduces dragon marks, which take the place of some or all of a race's subrace and grant certain abilities. In universe, they manifest on certain members of certain species in certain houses, but they can also be tweaked for homebrew settings, perhaps as a sign of being touched by the gods for some special purpose. Who knows? It's up to you. Now, there are no new monsters, but there is a healthy complement of new magic items. It was a virtual tie between this and Ravnica, and honestly, I wanted to put Ravnica over Eberron in the ranking, but it came down to the price in the end. There is slightly less tweakable content for homebrew worlds in Eberron, but Eberron gives it to you for 40% of the price of Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Number 3, Mordenkainans' Tome of Foes, retailing on the Wizards of the Coast site for $49.95. This provides a ton of insight on many of the peoples inhabiting the multiverse, as well as extra planar fiends like demons and devils. Take as much or as little from the lore as you wish, as this is your setting, but where this book really shines is in the robust bestiary and player race options. The bestiary has 140 NPCs, monsters, and fiends, with a lot of them suited for really high levels. New race options include the Githyanki and Githzerai, as well as the Eladrin, Sea Elf, and Shadar Kai subraces of Elf. A whole slew of new Tiefling variants, and the reappearance of the Dwergar and the Deep Gnome. I would argue the main thing keeping this robust source book from being higher in rank is that it's proportioned a lot more heavily towards DM content compared to player content, and many of the creatures in the bestiary are a far higher level than most parties can handle, though it does give people something to shoot for. Number 2. Volo's Guide to Monsters, retailing on the Wizards of the Coast site for $49.95. This also has a very robust bestiary, not quite as weighted toward higher levels. However, where it comes in more handy for players than those ranked lower is in the addition of a whopping 12 new races. It does list 13, but this is the second occurrence of the Goliath race. These other races include the Aasimar, Furbolg, Kenku, Lizardfolk, Tabaxi, Triton, Bugbear, Goblin, Hobgoblin, Kobold, Orc, and Yuan-ti Pureblood. This gives players and DMs alike a huge variety of new possibilities from which to build player characters and NPCs, no matter what kind of setting you have in mind. Number 1. Xanathar's Guide to Everything, also retailing on the Wizards of the Coast site for $49.95. This book truly does live up to its name, offering pretty much anything possible except for new races, backgrounds, or monsters. It's got new archetypes for every class, with a few reappearances from previous releases, backstory customizations, racial feats, additional mechanics for falls, sleep traps, spell, and downtime, more ways to use the various tools, encounter builders for every possible biome and terrain, more on magic items, a slew of new spells, and more. This truly has something to offer for everyone, player and DM alike, without emphasizing any one setting over another. It is the most versatile of all the supplemental rulebooks released by Wizards of the Coast for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition yet as of the filming of this video, and very well worth the addition into your gaming library. So, what do you think? Do you agree with me, or do you have a different ranking for certain books with regard to Homebrew campaign worlds? Let me know in the comments below, because I would love to hear what you have to say about this. And I should reiterate, none of these books and PDFs are outright bad. They all have something good to offer and are worth checking out. What you've heard in this video is merely my humble opinion on their applicability outside of the established official settings and how much you get for your money. If you play in established settings, obviously their applicability for you will vary. But that's the beauty of this kind of game, isn't it? The only limit is your imagination. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments about this video, this channel, or me, please put them in the comments section below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Don't forget, follow me on Facebook at The Cross Cultural Nerd and on Twitter at XCultural Nerd. I'm Daniel, The Cross Cultural Nerd, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.